Make sure to follow my Twitter at @ADodgerKid for more content. So I just got back from watching Suzume, the new movie from Makoto Shinkai, director of Your Name and Not Your Name but still kind of Your Name. And after seeing this film, I have a lot of thoughts about it. They are mostly all good thoughts, but I have just a couple things I had a problem with. I'm going to try to give my thoughts out the best way I can because this movie still hasn't fully settled in with me. I just got back from watching it like 2 hours ago, so yeah. But I'm going to still give my thoughts anyways. But before we get into my fun-killing critiques, let's get into what I liked about this movie because I do think that this is without a doubt a pretty good flick to watch whether it be at home or in theaters. So to start off with the most obvious praise, the animation in this movie is absolutely stunning. If there is one thing you can expect to be great about a Makoto Shinkai film, it's the visuals. In fact, I think this might have the best animation out of all of them yet. I mean, it is kind of cheating since this is the first movie of his I've seen in theaters, but it's still saying something when I tell you that this movie might look better than Your Name. The soundtrack complements the movie very well too. I mean, it always does. Every time I watch one of these movies, I'm gonna have at least a couple songs I listen to during my writing time, and this one is no different. I really love the music and animation in this movie. It should come as a surprise to nobody and really goes without saying, but still, this film is stunning to watch and stunning to listen to. And moving on from the visuals, let's talk about the story. Now, with Makoto Shinkai movies, you pretty much know everything you're going to expect from the story in his movies. There's a young girl and a guy who don't know each other, but some supernatural force draws them together, and they have to stop it together, and they fall in love. That's pretty much what Your Name and Weathering With You are, and it's no different in this movie. But I will say that even though the basic gist of this movie is more or less the same as those two films, it has a lot of qualities about it that are a lot different from the prior film. In a way, Suzume feels more mature, and that's not really to do with the actual content in this movie, but more so the feeling you get from it. This feels like a more matured and realized version of Shinkai's style of storytelling. It's more subtle, more ambitious, and more creative with the decisions that Shinkai makes here. In Weathering With You, it felt like the character interactions were held back a bit, as it was a little self-indulgent. And while they aren't perfect here, Shinkai gives characters some real conflict and tension with one another that help them feel more like actual people with real human emotions. There's tense moments of emotional conversations, whether it be aggressive statements that weren't meant to be said, or a typical heart-to-heart about the characters' lives and pasts, which gives you a lot of moments to get a good feel of these characters, their personalities, and their relationships with one another. There's a lot of time to just breathe and get a feel for who these people are. The more lighthearted and comedic scenes were also nice to see and put a smile on my face, even getting a little laugh out of me every now and again. And all of this is thanks to the lead character, Suzume, who in my opinion is Shinkai's strongest protagonist yet. I've seen some reviews call her the worst and least compelling out of all of them, and I just can't agree with that at all. She is the most compelling in my humble opinion. Whether it be her emotional backstory that comes full circle by the end of the film, or just her personality and dialogue, she feels the most human out of all of them, and feels the most distinct from the rest of them. I mean, I love Mitsuha, don't get me wrong, but something about Suzume strikes me a lot more. She's a lot of fun when you do get to see her. She drives the plot forward very well. Her backstory is sad, and her character's conclusion by the end of the movie is extremely satisfying and emotional. I liked her a lot. She also has a bigger screen presence in the movie than most other Shinkai protagonists, because while most of his films are basically 50-50 with the two love interests, this isn't the same here. The movie is literally called Suzume, so yeah, but Sota really doesn't have as much screen time or screen presence as Suzume. I mean, he literally turns into a chair. I still think he's pretty cool. I don't like him nearly as much as Taki or Hina, but he's not bad. The movie was getting a lot of memes and attention for the whole chair transformation stuff, and in all honesty, it works in this movie. Like, the guy turns into a chair. It seems weird conceptually, but in the actual story it makes a lot of sense and it works pretty well and doesn't ruin any of what makes you take the film seriously. Other characters like Suzume's aunt or Sota's best friend or the characters that Suzume meets during her adventure are all pretty endearing and likable while they're there. Shinkai is pretty good at making you like the characters in his story, so once again, it's not much of a surprise there. The supernatural aspect of Shinkai's film seemed to go higher and and higher in scale as he continues making them, and it's very clear to see here. We went from saving a town to flooding Tokyo to literally saving all of Japan from earthquake spirit worm beast monsters. The concept of the ever after and the doors and the gatekeepers is all really interesting. Once again, another quality of these movies is the world building. The supernatural concepts in these movies never fail to be creative, and even if the stories are getting formulaic and repetitive, you will have something new just with the concepts introduced in each movie. The only thing that confuses me is how this fits in with the other two movies, since, you know, they're all in this shared universe. Like, where does this fit in with Weathering with You? I don't need an answer, but I need an answer. But while I do like the characters and the story, I still have to say that even with its differentiating qualities, it's still very samey with his previous two films. Don't get me wrong, this movie is pretty ambitious regardless, but the plot has a lot of very clear notes taken from Weathering with You and Your Name. I mean, the climax of this film is quite literally just the climax of Weathering with You. And while I think it's a lot better done here than in that movie, it's still super clear to notice that this is like the exact same thing that happened in this movie from the start of Act 3 all the way to the finish. In fact, now I'm remembering this, there was this weird directorial editing choice to have the movie cut to credits abruptly, then cut from the credits to the last moments of the movie repeatedly, and I'm almost certain that it was done with the intent to make people feel like it's different from Weathering with You, but it isn't. Like, it's not at all. And that brings me to this point. I feel like if this movie was made years back when Weathering with You and Your Name weren't released, then this movie would probably be the most loved out of any Shinkai film. But since it's come out after those two movies, it's getting more difficult to get the same magic of the first film, because you've already seen this kind of thing done before multiple times, so it does kind of hold it back. You could say that that's not the fault of the movie, but it kind of is, since it's the same director making these movies, and it's his job to make them feel different, but he doesn't make them different. And when I said this movie has a lot of ambitious ideas, it does have a lot. I'm putting emphasis on the term a lot here because there is a lot in this movie, and because there's so much shit happening, it's really hard for all of it to get the proper explanation and pacing it needs. Like, shit will just happen in this movie and then 5 minutes later it's like a distant memory. There is just some very strange pacing in this movie, and I say strange because I literally can't tell whether it's too fast or too slow. Like, the third act in this movie is surprisingly a lot longer than it felt like it was, but before everything then, it felt a lot faster. And it's not like the pacing significantly hurts the story, because I don't think it does. I think the climax was good being as long as it was, and I think the snappy pace of the first two acts fit very well with the adventure. But it's still very noticeably weird when actually put together, because it doesn't feel the most fluid, like it doesn't feel very consistent. And the more I think about it, this story would unironically have worked perfectly as a show rather than a movie, because there is a lot of stuff you could expand upon if given extra time. Director's cut in the future? Who knows? But even with those being said, the issues are severely overshadowed by the positives in this movie. Even if the stories are becoming repetitive, there is just something about Shinkai's films that really stick with you after you watch them. Like, they really do pull the emotions out of you. It is kind of crazy to compare anyone to Miyazaki, but Shinkai is a lot like Miyazaki in the way he's able to get you to feel so many different emotions from watching his films, even with some of the flaws that they may have. All of these are reasons that I just can't call Suzume anything less than a great and endearing film. It's not the masterpiece that Your Name was, but it's still a very lovable story with lovable characters and amazing visuals. I do hope that Shinkai begins to venture out to different plot structures in the future, but as long as the same stuff he does is good, I'm not going to complain about it too much. So rating Suzume out of 10, I'm going to give it an 8 to an 8.5. It's a very good movie. I will watch it again, and I do recommend it if you haven't seen it yet. If you have seen it, what do you think of it? Let me know in the comments. And with all that being out of the way, I'm tired as hell. I've made 2 videos this week. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.